Early Weigh-In podcast is back, going down this Saturday at the Apex. We got a 13-fight card, UFC Vegas 89. Card's taking some heat, another one of these average fight nights, but looking through the card are a couple good fights for us to break down, man. Excited to get in here to it with you. In our main event, we have Amanda Ribas and Namajunas fighting at flyweight in our 5-round main event there. And then co-main, we go up to heavyweight, man. Karl Williams taking on Justin Tafa. Not wasting any time. Go ahead and pass it over to you and let you recap last week. Positive night for us both. Got back on track. Hand it over to you, man.
Quite the downgrade from the main event to the co-main event, dude. That's crazy. All right, we'll take a look over at your card first. Your only straight bet, which we were both honor. Glad we both got honor. And real quick, that was the biggest fluke of a reffing decision that I've seen this year, man. Like, he's lucky that Amorim got that finish, but I hate to harp on it anymore. But that was a terrible judgment by Mike Beltran. Anyway, Jacqueline Amorim, she did get the armbar and was able to finish it a few times. I do think that she's pretty good. And moving forward, I think that she's got all the right skills. I think that her Achilles heel will be when she fights a girl who isn't necessarily built like a girl. Whenever she fights somebody who has that like alpha mentality, Jessica Andrade, I think she could run into some issues. But she, for what it's worth, I think she's pretty good. Your biggest swing of the night was the parlay with Mike Davis, who clearly covered his price tag, and Kennedy and Zheleznyakova. Looking back on it, how do you feel about that?
I mean, the spot was great. You're taking on, you're getting a 41-year-old who's missed at this weight and everything, but I did not expect him to come out and throw 500 strikes in a fight. It's pretty crazy. But I don't know. I was not pissed off by the decision. Truth be told, I thought OSP won the fight. So, I thought the judging was a bit weird because round 3, Kennedy gets knocked down but wins it on 2 judges' scorecards. So it was super weird. But honestly, I thought OSP won the fight. So I'm okay with saying that's a bad bet for myself.
Post USADA OSP, you might be able to get a few more wins after that. I thought it was odd that Zheleznyakova decided to point fight with OSP, which in my head was one of the only ways that OSP could win that bout. I thought Kennedy could have pushed a little bit more of a pace.
I was about to say, put 0 pace on him. Yeah.
Who probably the most controversial fight of the night, Christian Rodriguez taking on Isaac Dolgarian. You had Rodriguez plus 3.5. I think that you called it just about perfect. You knew that Dolgarian was going to win the first 2 rounds, but if Christian Rodriguez was able to avoid getting finished, he does Christian Rodriguez things, and he picks up that pace in the 3rd round. And in my head, scored a 10-8 himself in that 3rd round and made the 2nd round so close that I think it was not a robbery by any means. That was only minus 105, and that was a quick little unit for you for, in my opinion, one of the best reads on the card from you. Josiane Nunez versus Chelsea Chandler. I
thought she almost got the choke in round 1. I was pissed I didn't play Chandler straight.
She did. And Chandler missing weight. I mean, that was another curveball looking at this fight. It was an odd one for sure. But Chelsea Chandler, she's a
big girl. That's all it takes.
Big girl. That's exactly right. You took the words from my mouth. She's a big girl, so she could probably be top 15. Moving down, Rafael Filho inside the distance, and he ended up getting the tap, but I think that you made the right call by playing the fight wins inside the distance. Filho, whether he was getting the submission or not, he tends to dominate positions on the ground, and he certainly could have finished that with a TKO ground and pound. I thought that was a good plus money play. You hit that for 1.5 units, and then fight doesn't go the distance. And Thiago Moises versus Mitch Ramirez. I'm sure you were puckered a little bit towards.
I know. Well, I know the under 2.5 was like 50 points better, but I was like, no, I've been screwed way too much this year. I would have been extra sweaty.
And would that have hit still?
Yeah, it still hit.
Okay, well, still going into the 3rd round, it's right. Always a little closer than you'd like. You ended up plus 1.11 units on the night, and we'll certainly take that for sure. looking over at my card, in the main event, I had Marcin Tybura. It was one of those plus EV plays. I didn't like placing it, but long term, I think he was the more well-rounded MMA fighter, and he proved it on Saturday. I took 2 big dog shots, which both looked probably worse than their number that I got. I had Natan Levy over Mike Davis. Mike Davis, a few years off and a couple surgeries. I didn't think it was that bad of a fade, considering Natan Levy is a decent fighter. Did not pan out. We talked about the Jacqueline Amorim fight, and then Mitch Ramirez versus Thiago Moises. Mitch Ramirez, if he could have defended the takedowns, maybe it's a whole different story, but he couldn't. So ultimately a bad spot at plus 280. My best play on the card, probably this plus 240 on Fight Doesn't Go the Distance between Chasson and Kianzad. It was plus 240 on something that already happened. I thought that was a pretty killer play right there. And then I had a parlay with Thielho and Mearshart. And truthfully, I think they both covered their price tag. I was pretty happy with the parlay as well for plus money. Plus 3.89 units. And yeah, like I said, I think we'll both take that after coming off of a not so great week the week prior. It's good that we both were able to bounce back right there. All right, moving on to the first fight of the night. Low-level heavyweights, man. I actually love this for a fight to start us off. We got Kamaru Usman's little brother, Mohammed Usman, taking on Mick Parkin, who is undefeated 8-0. This is a fight. I've tried to fade Mick Parkin, I think, every single time. He's, contender series, debut. I've tried to fade Mick Parkin. I don't think he's that good. But the same can be said for Mohammed Usman. He's one of these guys. He's called the motor for a reason. He just works. And that's probably the best aspect of his game, is that he can push a pace and kind of wear on his opponents. I think Mick Parkin's going to have a significant striking edge in this one. He'll probably utilize that jab really well. He's exposed. Like, he's super hittable, and Mo throws some power. So there is some potential for Mo to land like a huge overhand or something. But if this fight stays on the feet and Mick Parkin can keep that distance, I think that he'll clearly outclass Usman. It's just whether or not he can keep his back off the cage, because that's where Usman's going to try and get the most of his work done. That being said, judges aren't scoring for cage control or any control for that matter. So Mick Parkin is the pick for me. It's, if people continue to bet Usman and I get Mick Parkin at minus 130, like, I might consider it, but I do hate him, so I probably won't play that.
Yeah, well, I'm on the same side, man. I've told you kind of all week it's taken some discipline for me not to bet Mick Parkin. I think Usman is, stronger, the better athlete, but I feel like Parkin's the way better, way more rounded fighter in this matchup. I can see him winning by using his grappling. I can see him winning to a decision, and I think Mohammed Usman's pretty limited to a knockout here, which I'm just not so sold on his volume and even the ability to knock Mick Parkin out, who I think is a pretty durable guy. I was quite shocked to even see that Usman was 3-0 in the UFC, because when I watch his fight, the guy loses a lot of the minutes into a fight. He'll just kind of have some bigger moments in the fight, But I kind of feel like he's just going to get out hustled here by Mick Parkin. Parkin's just going to be in his face a bit more, like you said, with the jab, throwing a bit more volume. I think he throws a bunch more kicks out at range, and even up against the fence, I think he's just a bit more active than Usman is here. You talk, throw in the fact that he's training with Tom Aspinall. It's a great partner to have in the gym with you every single day. I think he reacts better to shots. I think he's a little bit faster. I don't know. I do see some Mohammed Usman love that I don't necessarily agree with this week, man. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the line as well, hoping it continues to come down. If you hop on it, might not leave me another choice but to do so myself. Taking a step down to the flyweight division. Go ahead.
I just said, don't hold your breath.
We move down to the flyweight division. We see Igor Servino taking on Andre Lima. This is a fight that I haven't done a ton on. I still need to watch some more tape on these guys. And I feel like Saturday should just be kind of used as an opportunity to see how we want to, back or fade these guys going forward. I do favor Andre Lima to win this fight, but, in his debut, I don't really want to lay minus 190. These guys are both young, 20, 25 years old, decent, regional competition. They're both undefeated as well. I just see the biggest advantage in this fight being Andre Lima's stand-up. He's got a massive kickboxing, Muay Thai background. I think he's much cleaner on the feet. His cardio in the Contender Series looked really good to me, defended the takedowns that were coming at him. And when you see Igor, he's a guy who's never seen the scorecards. 4 TKOs, 4 submissions, seems to be a little bit more well-rounded. I do think he's going to need to mix in some takedowns here because, again, I favor Andre Lima pretty heavily on the feet. I see him just winning a lot of these minutes at range. And one thing I was telling you is fight doesn't go the distance is minus 165 here, looking at just a little over 60%. But these guys finish at 86%. So they're big-time finishers. They've just never been finished. So it's kind of – I think we're going to – there's some violence here, but it's kind of scaring me since they've neither been finished. Do you have any type of read on this fight at all?
I'll be honest, no. But just looking at this, I think that Igor at 20 years old, I looked at some of his wins, even though some of the guys he was fighting have pretty decent records. You look more into their records, and it does seem like those are lower level Brazilian regional guys that he's getting these wins over. And at only 20 years old, taking on somebody with as much combat experience as Lima has, I do think that the 5 extra years of being on this earth and the whole time he's been training, that's going to play a huge factor in here. We've talked about this multiple times before. My favorite thing to do whenever I think an undefeated fighter is going to lose is play that decision prop. And you're taking Lima, who is coming off of a decision win. Lima's minus 175 to play him straight, plus 225 for the decision. That's probably where I'm looking to play this if I play it at all. But currently it's a layoff fight for me because truthfully, I haven't really done my due diligence in studying the tape. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it, though. All right, a fight that I'm actually pretty pumped for. A little biased. I got Darya in our fantasy league. It's Montserrat Rendon taking on Darya Zheleznyakova at 135 pounds. I certainly lean Darya here. I think that you can't really trust lower level women's MMA fighters to be able to utilize the best game plan. I think, Rendon's best game plan is to get this fight to the mat. I'm not thrilled with her wrestling. She does have a little bit of it. She'll shoot, but I'm not exactly sure that she's going to be able to land here at a consistently at least. Darya does look green on her back. She doesn't have much whenever she does get taken to the ground, but when it's standing on the feet, I think that she'll have a clear advantage over Rendon. She hits really, really hard. And, I think Darya's live to give Montserrat Rendon her first loss of her career. I look at Rendon, a lot of her wins are by split decision. She's never really dominant whenever she does win. So I'm curious to see how this fight plays out. I edge it to Darya. Her price tag's gotten up to minus 225, which is crazy. Because I was looking at it at minus 150 on FanDuel earlier this week, and considering it, knowing if I lose against a debuting women's fighter, that's on me. And now it's easy to pass on this fight from a money line perspective whenever you see Zheleznyakova up over minus 200. So Darya's the pick, but it's a layoff fight for me.
Yeah, Darya is the side that I lean here as well. I do think that we're approaching the point where the line is getting a bit out of hand. I do think she's probably got the clearest advantage on the fight, though. Like you said, with her striking, she's a mean girl, man. She's got good finishing instincts, powerful. She's good in the clinch. But it's very hard for me to overlook that she also has a massive, disadvantage on the mat. It might be, I know Montserrat's not that much of a finisher, but I do think the skill gap on the mat is almost just as significant. The fight with Melissa Dixon, very concerning, getting mounted, pretty much holding on for dear life, getting finished with a couple seconds left in the round. It showed me very little bottom game. Melissa Dixon was a girl who was only 4-0 at the time, had 4 professional fights. So she wasn't a high level girl that was able to take advantage of it either. One of the regional fights with Zheleznyakova that last a little bit longer, she is held on bottom as well before finishing that fight. I just think Rendon's a tough girl, man. Yeah, you got a tough Mexican girl who, I think might get whooped up on a little bit, but she's okay to walk through some fire and try to land her game. I do think at plus 200, that's what I bet the fight doesn't go the distance at. I think Darya could very likely finish, Montserrat on the feet, but seeing that there's such a skill gap in on the mat as well, I thought plus 200 is a very generous number. And I also took a stab on Rendon's sub at plus 1,800. I just feel like you don't have to be wrong too many times at plus 1,800, but if the fight were to hit the floor, I don't know. I think plus 1,800 could look like maybe a gift. And so I was willing to take just a small stab there. 0.1 unit.
It would be a pretty sick call if you called her first finish and method of victory at that. I don't hate that number by any means because all the reasons you mentioned are true, My biggest concern with Rendon is that she started MMA post 30. So I feel like she was a finished product even on the regional scene. And so I'm curious to see as she ages, 35 years old, that's kind of that cutoff point. So I'm curious to see if she's still improving at this point in their career. So
yeah, the number was the reason I played it. When you see a girl like Darya with a clear ground disadvantage, I'd almost take 1,800 with any girl on the roster,
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Hope it pans out, man. Moving up to featherweight, a fight we've kind of talked about a lot this week. Stephen Nguyen taking on Jarno Errens at 145. First thing in the week started, I said I'd kind of looking at taking a shot on Jarno Errens, a guy that you've backed at dog money a couple times. He's tough. He's never been TKO'd in the past. And truth be told, especially at minus 190, minus 200, I'm really not sold on Stephen Nguyen. As I kind of ran the tape, though, you and I kind of both agree that maybe this is a good fight for him. I do think he's far more technical than Jarno Errens is out at space. His boxing's a lot sharper, calf kick. We really saw Errens struggle with the calf kick against Ding Sungwoo Choi. On the side on Errens, it's kind of easy to back him because I think he's a dog. He'll fight for the plus 180, but skill set wise, I don't know. I don't think he's that good, man. He's kind of low volume. He can be taken down and not showing me much off of his back. The fights that he made close in the UFC is because he just had kind of one big moment in those fights, lost a whole lot of the minutes there. We talked about narrative-wise as well. They've given Stephen Nguyen 3 shots on the Contender Series to get here, where they've made Errens go to Paris to fight Gomi, Singapore to fight Choi. It just doesn't it kind of seems that the UFC wants to get on track here. So I've laid off Errens at the moment. He seems like a popular underdog this week. I do think that's where the value lies, but I kind of see Stephen Nguyen edging out another decision here against Jarno Errens.
Okay, so I think that this fight, let's see, Jarno Errens. Okay. So fight goes to decision is minus or favorite odds. I kind of like this fight to end by TKO. I think both these guys are pretty solid strikers, and they're both pretty hittable at the same time. Jarno brings a lot of that power, where Stephen, even when he is tired, he still remains technical. And I think that that's the clear advantage that he has over Jarno Errens. But you talked about the pace that Errens pushes. And, as far as I'm concerned, he's got nothing to lose here. He's 0-2 in the UFC. This is his time to either, put up or shut up. And it's against somebody in Stephen Nguyen, who, even though Nguyen has a wrestling base, he rarely uses it. And he does seem to be, complacent striking whenever he can. And I do think that he'll have a technical advantage here. Errens opens up on the feet as he starts to slow down. And so I think that there's potential early for a Jarno Errens knockout, and then late for Stephen Nguyen. I like both those. The fight ends by TKO is plus 175. I kind of like that.
220 on FanDuel.
220 on FanDuel. Okay, so it's plus 175 on DraftKings, 220 on FanDuel. That might be how I play it. I was considering plus 175, plus 220 sounds like I'm going to have to pull the trigger. And yeah, like I said, it comes down to, I think Jarno Errens is going to sell out for a finish, or, just completely
get cut.
Yeah, get cut, get outclassed down the stretch of the fight. So yeah, the picks, Stephen Nguyen, we're looking at, still honestly not that terrible of a line at minus 175. Not something that I think that there's much, if any, value on it, but I do pick him to win. I think the fight ends inside the distance by TKO, though. officially. Moving up, Miles Johns taking on Cody Gibson at 135 pounds. This one's a tough one. In my head, Miles Johns is a pretty good fighter. He just kind of lacks whatever it takes to bust into that upper echelon of 135. I mean, it's a super stacked division, so you can't hardly fault him. But it does seem like he's pretty good everywhere, not great anywhere. And that's kind of been the downfall of him. On top of not being great anywhere, he does have a history of gassing. In his last fight, that wasn't the case, but he did pop for steroids. So you kind of get an idea that maybe he was juiced to the gills that fight, and that might have been the reason why he looked so good. Now he's coming back. He's looks like he's in shape online, but dang, he's not even 30 years old. I don't know, dude. He has a lot of potential. I just don't think he'll ever be good enough to break into the top 10 or top 15 for that matter. Cody Gibson, barnyard dog, dude. Like absolute. Yeah. I love the way he fights. He's 36 years old. He's got nothing to lose, man. He's going to go out there and try and break Miles Johns. And funny enough, that's the Achilles heel to Miles Johns' game up until this point. I want to bet Cody Gibson. The problem is he's not that great of a fighter, if I'm being completely honest. It's just stylistically, I think that this is a perfect matchup for him to kind of exploit the weaknesses of Miles Johns. So at plus money, he's the value side in my eyes. I think that I'd probably take him. I wish people would start parlaying Johns so that we could get Gibson at plus 150, because that's probably like the pull the trigger number right there. But at plus 125, I think I'm just going to pick him as the value side. I do think that he has a lot of potential to break him down the stretch. Just can't play him. So Gibson's the pick by decision or late third round finish.
Super close fight, man. This is one that I kind of struggled to clearly come out on a side. One thing looking back and watching the Cody Gibson fight against Brad Katona, I feel like at that pace, John's going to struggle to keep up, just like cardio-wise. And, I favor Johns as being the more technical guy on the feet with his boxing. But when Cody gets in your face like that, just doesn't give you the time to get the reads and things. It's a difficult fight, man. I also think he's probably not the better wrestler here, but I think Cody Gibson's probably the better submission grappler of the two. I think his durability is a bit better than Miles Johns. But like you said, Miles Johns is not a bad fighter. He kind of can do it all. Truth be told, he's got a wrestling background that if he needs to rely on it, he can. His boxing's pretty tight. His hands are sharp. They're fast. I think he'll have a big speed advantage in the pocket over Cody Gibson here. And you talked about him popping, and looking at him online, he's buffed up again, man. I don't know. It's post USADA era. Miles Johns might be on the sauce. I don't know. This is one where my gut is kind of leaning toward Miles Johns, but I don't think there's much meat on the bone left on it. I think if you're scraping for any value here, it's on, like you said, on the junkyard dog, Cody Gibson, who's going to fight for your dollar, who probably has the better gas tank of the two. So at 36, like you said, 37 years old, it's kind of like another fight we'll touch on here in a couple minutes. I kind of like the dog, but he's kind of getting up there in age, man. And so I kind of looked at doesn't go the distance at plus 120 here. But ultimately, just not the best read on this fight to pull the trigger on in general. Moving up, though, to 145, we do have a fight we both got a little bit of action on here. We got Ricardo Ramos taking on Julian Erosa. Both of us on the Erosa side here. You said it in your tweet. The time off can only benefit, the chin. The guy has a nice size advantage here, and he uses it. The guy fights long, behind his jab, uses his long-range weapons. His cardio is a massive factor here. I think the pace of fight, the pace that he brings into a fight is something that Ramos is not going to be able to keep up with. Ramos, black belt that he is, typically has the ability to get fights down to the mat. I don't see him having success grounding Julian Erosa for extended minutes here. And I think Erosa is just clearly the better striker on the feet outside of some spinning, back elbows, which, it's hard to say is a fluke when he has two of them, but, it's still a rare knockout in the UFC, Well, he'll try it. Yeah. I feel like it has to rely on him getting his opponent backed up against the cage and stuff. It's not something you can throw out at range and land. And that's his only knockouts in the last 8 years, man. So when I don't really see, I think the biggest hole for Erosa typically being the chin with the time off, the matchup. I don't know, man. At plus 148, I think we got the clear value side. You're a little bit heavier on there. I think I'm to win 2 units. You bet 2 units. But I think we're clearly on the right side with Julian Erosa here, another dog who will fight for your money.
I'll tell you why we got it at this price tag. It's because he was the favorite in both of his last 2 fights, and he gets knocked out in the first round. I think it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and now we're seeing a huge market overcorrection, man. Like, yes, there is potential for Julian Erosa to get chinned, but Ricardo Ramos, in my eyes at least, he's not necessarily a on-the-feet finisher,
Right.
Like you said, there's a couple of, not fluky, but a couple of unorthodox wins with the spinning back fists. And, barring that, I really struggle to see where he holds a clear advantage over Erosa, especially considering the fact that we don't think that he has the tools to get Erosa down on the mat and hold him there. I love being on the plus money side. Sadly, since we've tweeted it out, I've probably seen 10 plus people on it as well, and that line is not moving. So not necessarily what I love to see, but man, for all the reasons you mentioned as well, like I think that this is clearly a dog or pass spot, and I love betting Julian Erosa at dog odds. Finally, the market has at least corrected that. I don't personally think that Erosa. I would never bet Erosa at favorite odds, especially knowing what's happened up until this at this point in his career, how many times he's lost by KO. But at dog odds, clear side in my opinion. So I'm glad that we're both on him.
I think it's a 75% ROI as an underdog for Julian Erosa. Something crazy.
And that's all you need to know, man. And I love that. I love that we're both on him. Like to see it. I like to see him get it done at least one more time. I think that he's one of those fighters where even though he's subject to get flatlined every single fight, he always puts on exciting fights, and that's something that the UFC values quite a bit. So
sure.
I'd like to see him stay on the roster here. Moving on up a weight class to the prelim headliner. God, that's awful, dude. Trey Ogden versus Kurt Holobaugh. That's terrible.
It is.
That's tough. Okay. My breakdown for this fight. I think Trey Ogden, he took over for James Krause. And I'm blanking on the name of the gym. Help me out.
Oh, shit.
I know, that's crazy. Texas gym. What?
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, sorry. Texas gym, wherever it was that James Krause was.
Is it Glory?
Glory, yes, exactly. Trey Ogden has now taken that position. He's running it. I think that's probably keeping him in training. He's constantly getting looks from some of the best fighters that come through Glory MMA, and those are all good things for Trey Ogden. In his last fight, he finished Nicholas Mata, but they called it an early stoppage. He looked excellent.
Guess who?
Oh, Mike Beltran?
Yeah.
No way, dude.
I'm pretty sure.
Beltran's on my shit list for sure, dude. So anyway, he looked great against Nicholas Mata. Even though it was a premature stoppage, he was dominating that fight, and stinks that Beltran had to ruin that for him. The problem I have with Trey Ogden, although he is a super cerebral fighter, I think he comes in with a good game plan whenever he is fighting. He struggles to dominate fighters, even though we saw that in his Mata fight. Mata's not that great, man. And I'm not here saying that Holobaugh is great, but if you're not dominating Holobaugh pushes a crazy pace, just like Cody Gibson, like we were talking about. He is a junkyard dog, Holobaugh is, and I do think that that's something that's going to win minutes in the judges' eyes. I think that he could probably land the more, maybe not significant, but the bigger shots, the bigger moments in the fight, even if Trey Ogden is doing exactly what he wants to, keeping the fight at range, piecing him up. I just don't think that he's going to be winning very many points on the judges' scorecards. And I see this going to the judges at a pretty high clip. 37 years old, Kurt Holobaugh is not somebody I want to back, but when you see him at plus money against somebody who in Ogden that I can't really see him dominating this fight, it does make me want to play the plus money on Kurt Holobaugh. It's just a matter of if I get around to it, man. This fight is full of really closely lined fights, and every single one of the dogs, there are some pretty huge red flags. So it's tough to pick it, but I am going to go Kurt Holobaugh here.
Yeah, just looking at it now, Darya might be there at that range. Edmund maybe as well, but Rose is the only 2-1 favorite on the whole card potentially.
Yeah.
So a lot of tricky fights to navigate this week, and I kind of think this is one as well. Struggle to get like the clearest read on it. Ogden, the guy's lost to Jordan Levitt. He's lost to Thomas Gifford in the first round twice, and so it's like, do you really want to go lay minus 150, minus 160 on him? He's also looking on Bet MMA. Never been a favorite in the UFC before. So it's another reason to really kind of be cautious about laying chalk on him. But I think, I thought last fight he looked really good. 100% deserved that win. You talked about him being a coach, and you can most definitely tell that in his fight style. You talked about how cerebral he is. I put as well, fights very intelligently. He doesn't necessarily put himself in danger a whole bunch. He likes to keep it on the outside, counter you, use kicks. He's smart with his takedown entries to win rounds. So at the same time, when he gets these lower level competitions, it might, it is maybe a generous number to back him because, he, like you said, comes in with a game plan. So he's very cerebral, and Kurt Holobaugh is not, man. Kurt Holobaugh comes to push a ridiculous pace. I think he's going to be the one that only takes risk here,
That dude's fighting on instincts.
Exactly. But I think he holds a ton of the finishing upside here. I think he could hold a lot of the offensive grappling upside here. You said laying the bigger shots. I have the same thing written down. But like Cody Gibson, man, he's just getting up there in age, and you got to wonder when the decline's going to come. But when you get plus 130 or something like that on a dude who's going to fight for your dollar, it's hard to lay off, So, I don't know, man. I kind of think Kurt Holobaugh is pretty live here as well, so I'm going to side with the underdog with you as well. Moving up to the main card, this is a killer fight to kick off the main card. One of the more divided fights online as well. I've seen a lot of action on both sides here, and I kind of do think that a lot of the love on the Pajuelo side has to do with Fernando Padilla dropping the fight to Kyle Nelson last time out as a big favorite. I kind of think that's why we see some people on Luis Padilla, because I think Fernando Padilla is much sharper on the feet. I think he's a way better striker with his boxing, and from what I see on Luis Pajuelo, a little bit more hittable, man. I also think Fernando Padilla has all the submission upside. Luis is a guy who seems to come forward slinging bombs. But he's a bit one-dimensional, man. And from what I think is probably going to be a striking fight, it's kind of hard not for me to favor Padilla, who I think is clearly the better striker. This is another one, just like early in the fight with Servino and Andre Lima. Historically, both guys are big finishers, finishing at a crazy good rate, and you can get the under at minus 125. But then you look at them and neither one have ever been finished as well. So this is one where I think violence could be written on the table. I think it's going to be a high pace, nice slug, fight, but never being finished is kind of keeping me off playing the under here. I'm going to go with Fernando Padilla inside the distance. I think he's going to put Pajuelo away somehow.
Yeah, man. So I think that Fernando Padilla is the clear side here. This is one of those fights where I really want to bet him at minus 165. I think that he has the natural advantages, just being significantly longer. I think he's got 6 or 7 inches of reach or something like that. Pajuelo is coming off of the Contender Series win, given Cody Ring his first loss. And truthfully, I think that – I'm sorry, not Cody Ring, Robbie Ring.
Right.
And truthfully, I think Robbie Ring was a fraud, and he got fraud checked right here. You know, that's not a great win in my opinion. And looking back on the rest of his record, nothing really is standing out to me to, you know, convince me that this fight is going to be competitive. You know, I mean, Kyle Nelson, he's a veteran of the game. He knows he knows what it takes to get the job done, and that's exactly what he did in that fight. You know. Padilla, still really, really young. I think he has quite a high ceiling. It's just tough to back him right now because we've seen him lose and then we've seen him get a really early knockout. And, you know, neither one of those were, you know, an extended amount of time where he's doing well in a UFC fight. And so it's tough to want to lay juice on that. But as far as who I think is going to win this fight, I think Padilla should be the favorite. You know, I think mathematically it's probably not the best play, but I will be probably putting Padilla in a parlay. You know, I like to throw in like a money line parlay, and Padilla minus 165. That's that perfect range where I don't like to lay that much juice on him. But I do think that he has the advantages, and minus 165 pairs up well. Give me some plus money on my parlay. So, I lean Padilla here. I lean Padilla here for sure. He's only 27 years old. Pajuelo, where's he coming out of? Peru. I'm not sure the looks that he's getting in training camp. I'm not sure who he's training with, to be honest with you. And I think that Padilla is probably the best fighter that he's faced up until this point by a long shot. So definitely lean Padilla here. Tough to. Our next fight at 145 pounds. No, okay. This isn't the people's main event here, but it is a highly bet on fight. There's a lot of takes that I've seen on MMA Twitter up until this point. We got Billy Quarantillo taking on Youssef Zalal. Youssef Zalal, this is his second stint in the UFC. From what I've heard, he won a same night tournament in 3 different combat sports, and the UFC said that's good enough for us and brought him back here to the big show. Youssef, whenever he got in on his first time, he was only like 20 years old. He went on a killer 3-fight win streak, and then he ran into some really, really tough competition, especially at that age. And so I don't fault him much for the 3 losses that we've seen in the UFC. Here against Billy Quarantillo, they're not really doing him any favors. Again, you know, this is a tough bounce back fight, and, you know, a pretty significant step down in competition for the people that Billy Q has been fighting up until this point in his UFC career. Now, something that's super interesting about this fight is that Billy Q, in my head, he's another one of these fighters similar to Christian Rodriguez, who takes a beating at first, but he'll outlast you. And he's got a pace, and he'll push that pace. And, you know, we're seeing 3rd round finishes, a few of them in the UFC. The Alexander Hernandez, it didn't even make it to the 3rd round, but it's due to the fact that people gas out trying to finish him, and then he picks up the pace. Zalal has excellent cardio. He kind of utilizes his cardio to win fights. Right. You know, you look back at some of the losses that he had in the UFC, the Ilia Topuria fight, the fact that he made it to the scorecards, dude, that's a win. That's a win. That's better than half the, 90% of the roster could do. So it is tough. I understand the buyback on Zalal. I think stylistically, this kind of, there's a lot of, I think Zalal has way more potential at this point in his career. So I am curious to see how he comes back into the UFC, if he's added some skills to his game. And I think that this is a really competitive, close fight. I think that this sees the judges like, a high clip. And of course, it's minus 230 to go to the judges' scorecards. And I think that they got it right. This is a competitive fight against 2 people who don't have much finishing upside if the other guy that they're fighting isn't gassing out. So I think that this is just going to be an awesome fight. Give me Zalal at plus money, but it's probably a 50-50 fight.
So I feel a little bit highly more toward the Billy Q side. I bet him at minus 135, expecting the line to do exactly what it did. You know, and at the big plus number on Zalal, you know, I kind of get the buyback, but as we're coming down, man, I just feel like the value is clearly on Billy at this number here. Zalal, again, on short notice, he's coming up a weight class to 55. I think he'll have a small, you know, like speed advantage, but and he's probably going to win the kicking game at range. But I'm just not the biggest fan of his game here, and with very little like firepower coming back Billy's way, I don't think Billy's going to be shy to walk this guy down whatsoever. And, you know, with Zalal needing his range to use his kicks and everything, I just think the forward pressures are the great kind of style to negate that from Zalal. I feel like rounds 2 and 3 typically go to Billy at a super, super high clip. He holds a lot of the finish upside, if any. You know, I don't think Zalal's ever been finished, but Billy's stupid durable. And I just feel like he's going to throw more volume out. I think he probably has takedown upside. I agree. Close fight, probably going to decision. I would never lay like the minus 170, minus 180 on Billy when it got up there, but at minus 135, I do think Billy's probably around 60% in this fight. So I think he's good up to about a minus 150, truth be told. I'm on the Billy Q side here. I know this is what you're probably talking about as the people's main event. Peyton Talbot and Cameron Simon, very reminiscent of C-Rod and Bulgarian last week. You know, I think Talbot's a decent prospect, but I don't think he's any future champ or something like I see kind of people talking about. You know, the guy has a really, really good pace. That's probably the best part about his game, and he can take a punch. But for a guy who's got his size and range, he doesn't use it well. He's poor defensively, shown easily that he can be taken down. And skill for skill, I kind of almost lean Cameron Simon as being the more skilled martial artist here. The fight kind of almost feels 50-50. He'll sit more down on his combinations. He'll, you know, throws more power. I do think he probably has takedown upside here and just as proven cardio, in my opinion. You know, I feel like he's super live to win, you know, like C-Rod wins round 3 at a big clip. I kind of feel like Cameron Simon wins round 1 at a decent clip here. Also, you know, seeing a guy like Cameron Simon lose his O to a guy who was 5 pounds overweight, I just, you know, he's not scared to take a fight. He's not scared to lose his O. He's game to fight, man. I think he's going to grow from it. I think he's motivated from it. You've got the champ in the room with you every single day. I don't know. I do think there's some value on Cameron Simon if this line's going to continue to swell. So give me the underdog and Cameron Simon.
Wonder what kind of technique old Dricus Duplessis is teaching Cameron Simon.
It's more of the mindset of having the champ there.
Yeah, no, I get you. I just saw some, some like anti-highlight clips of Dricus Duplessis, and then when he misses, he looks terrible, dude. He looks so bad. I think that this fight goes to decision at a stupid high clip. You can get it at minus 170, and truthfully, like I think that is the play, dude. Like I'll probably find at least just a unit. Like I don't want to lay 2 or 3 units on minus 170 fight goes to decision. It's one of my least favorite bets to place because you're like hoping that there's no action. You know, you don't get a breather at any point in the fight. And, it's not my favorite bets to make, but it is one that we're trying to bet a little bit more. And truthfully, I think that there's meat on the bone at minus 170 fight goes the distance. I looked at this fight to either guy to win by split decision is only plus 300, if I'm not mistaken.
That's so crazy. Going to decision.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy. Like, I don't know. I think that this is a really close fight for all the reasons that Bulgarian and Christian Rodriguez fight was going to be. Talbot's super hittable, and he's undefeated. He's undefeated. Yeah. So I think that Simon, if he wins, he's going to win a decision. I would rather lay juice on either one of these guys to get the decision than try and bet the Simon by decision at plus 220. I don't think that there's much, that I love there. But I do think that both these guys are solid prospects. They don't get finished. And I do think that this sees the judges' scorecard. So for the sake of the pick, I think that Talbot is probably, if the UFC were to pick who they want to win, probably Talbot. I think he has just kind of the aesthetic, whatever, that they would be able to push in the UFC. But Simon, he's only 23 years old, pretty technically sound. I think he has, just as much potential to win this fight. But I do think that both these guys are tough enough that it's going to see the judges' scorecard. So Talbot for the official pick. This fight goes to decision at minus 170 as the actual play I'm looking at. Moving on. One of your favorite fighters, like since he came into the UFC, I feel like you've always loved Edmen Shahbazyan.
Backed him a couple times, yeah.
Yeah, backed him a couple times. It's just a fun fighter to watch. He's still super young. And I do think that the UFC is kind of doing him a favor here. You look at the card itself, it's not great. It's a good one to put Edmen Shahbazyan on the main card, give him an opponent that isn't that great, and maybe he could start to turn things around in his career. My biggest thing is that I just, after seeing the way that Edmen Shahbazyan dies whenever it runs out of cardio, is really bad, man. I likened it to Derek Brunson, where, man, when they're healthy or not healthy, but whenever they still have gas in the tank, they look pretty good. But whenever whenever their cardio depletes, they like completely have a fallout. It's like they're not even close to the same fighter they were whenever they had gas. So I can't back Shahbazyan at this price tag. It's getting up over the minus 200 mark at this point. And even though I don't think AJ Dobson is that great of a fighter, he's never been finished. And I think that it's really hard to bank on somebody in Edmen Shahbazyan where most of his win equity is inside the distance, at least historically throughout his career. So because Dobson hasn't ever been finished, it's making me lay off the fight. But I do think that this is a quote-unquote setup fight for Edmen Shahbazyan moving forward.
Yeah, I feel the same about it kind of being a setup fight for Edmen here. I'm on him at minus 185. I just kind of feel like there's levels to the game, and I feel like Edmen's on a much higher level than AJ Dobson is here. Fought a much higher level opponent, trains at a much better gym, and I do not think that AJ Dobson has the type of style needed to really cause Edmen the issues here. At striking range, I don't think AJ is going to have much for Edmen Shahbazyan. I feel like this is Edmen's fight on the feet 9 times out of 10. I think he's just going to pick Dobson apart here because Dobson doesn't push much pace. He doesn't push a grappling pace as well. He's just a guy, honestly. He's well-rounded, but just hasn't really impressed me in any particular aspect of the game. I think he's going to be just content to strike, try to land his 1-2s, just going to be a step behind Edmen, who's the better kickboxer at range here. So, at only 26 years old, still a ton of room for Edmen with the competition that he's fought, and I like this to be a good bounce-back spot for him. Co-main event, absolute banger at heavyweight. Karl Williams taking on Justin Tafa. Tafa, truth be told, I think he got an easier fight this time around. I thought De Lima was a much bigger wrestling threat, even though that's what Karl Williams' game is. I think De Lima is a better grappler, just say it that way. And I also think De Lima had a bigger submission upside. I think De Lima was way more dangerous on the feet. And Tafa was like plus 120 to De Lima, and plus 150s, plus 160s were still sitting out there on Tafa earlier in the week. So, looking at it, I think he's a bigger dog to somebody that I don't rate as high. I think there's clear advantages for Justin Tafa on the feet, way more power, way better boxing, but he's pretty, just flat out, he's one-dimensional, and every single win, I believe, has come by TKO under 1.5 rounds. So I feel like prop hunting was the best way to go for this fight here. I feel strongly that if he's going to win, his TKO comes in round 1, because I kind of feel like if this fight does get to 2 and 3, it's because Karl Williams has landed his takedowns, and I feel like the fight's going to start to swing his way with this cardio advantage that he has. I did take a shot on Justin Tafa, though. First round TKO at plus 430. I think that's his path to victory, and implies like 18%. And honestly, I think that could be about a 25-35%. So, I think I'm going to pick Karl Williams, but I think Justin Tafa round 1 TKO is holding some clear value.
I think that Tafa by TKO, you said you got it at what for round 1?
Plus 430.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I also like Tafa by KO plus 240. If you're going to play the Tafa side, you look at who he's been beating in the UFC, and I mean, you could not scrape that barrel anymore. Right. It's low.
And even
low,
who's beating.
Say it again.
Even who's beating him, De Castro.
Bandera, man, that's
Yeah.
a tough one to
Bandera.
come back from for sure, dude. Like it's tough. But you look at the Karl Williams side, and it's like, okay, he's probably a finished product. 34 years old. He is a primary wrestler, and for somebody who's getting 8 takedowns in a fight and landing multiple takedowns every single fight that he has, for him not to have a submission win on his record is a little concerning. He's trying to get the fight to the mat. He doesn't have the ability to finish it. If there was I don't even know if it's a race, to be honest with you, but if there was a race that Karl Williams being able to take down, it's Samoans, dude. Like this is somebody in my head. Justin Tafa, Justin Tafa, Junior Tafa, Mark Hunt, you name it. Every single Samoan that's come into the UFC has been an absolute banger stand-up artist, but doesn't have anything off their back. Tai Tuivasa, prime example. Karl Williams should have a clear advantage, and if he can avoid getting knocked out, which we've never seen happen in his career, I think that he should probably get this fight done. It's just a matter of if he's going to be able to finish it or not. I think Tafa isn't going to have much off of his back, but I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles here. Karl Williams is probably my side. There's no way I'm playing him at 2-1, but he's my pick. I really hope you hit your Tafa round 1 KO so that we can fade Tafa in the future. But I think for the sake of this, I'll pick Karl Williams. Moving on to the main event, at flyweight, like you said, it's Amanda Ribas taking on Rose Namajunas. They've both been at 115 pounds, and even though I think Rose might be on paper, she's got 2 inches on Amanda Ribas, I don't think that that's what it's going to look like come weigh-ins. I do think that Amanda Ribas is actually the bigger of the 2 fighters. And maybe I'm proven wrong here in a couple of days, but in my head, I think that Ribas is just a little bit bigger. I've looked at pictures of Rose coming into this fight. Like, she's not adding muscle, that's not what I'm seeing. Where when I look at Amanda Ribas, like veins in her arms, she's shredded. I think that this is probably much more her weight class than it is Rose. Technically speaking, Rose has some clear advantages. She has the experience. She has the cardio, probably the technical striking. But I do think that she's going to be at a significant disadvantage with power, and Ribas, while she does leave herself open on the feet, she throws hard, man. And I do think that she's going to be winning the minutes simply because she's landing the harder shots, even if Rose is piecing her up. I think Rose could put together a game plan and drag this out and outclass her, but that still doesn't mean that she's going to win the fight. If she's losing the big moments, that might weigh more on a judge's mind than being able to jab her 20 times in the face. So for me, it's tough. I'm not going to lay this price on Rose. I like Rose for what it's worth. Mentally, you don't really know what she's going to be coming in there. Like that's something that you definitely don't want to back as a favorite. I've backed Rose a few times, but most of the time it's her at dog odds or at least closer to 50-50. And just knowing that she could pull a Cowboy Cerrone and just not show up for that night is enough for me to lay off of Rose, even though I think that she's technically better. All the everything else, I think that Rose it's in her favor, but this is a layoff spot for me. Maybe I could talk, just talking about it, maybe I could talk myself into Rose and Padilla in my parlay. That'd give me plus money.
Right.
I'd probably take that.
Hey, I'm on the same side, and we see the fight pretty dang similar, just truth be told. I think you can't force it at this price, potentially. It could be to the point where it's getting a little bit wide, but I do think the early line movement on Rose was warranted. I cap her roughly around a -200 here. Experience in 5 rounds, more proven gas tank down the stretch, fought some of the best girls in the world. I think she's not going to throw as much volume, but I think her boxing's a little bit more technical. I think she's a better kicker out at range. And as far as durability goes, seems to massively favor Rose Namajunas as well. My main concern for Rose, though, I feel like Ribas is going to throw a ton of volume out there. And I do feel like if anybody's going to land takedowns, I feel like it's going to be Amanda Ribas. I feel like as far as jiu-jitsu, we've seen Rose submitted twice. I feel like Amanda Ribas, could win some minutes on the mat here. Higher work rate for the first couple of rounds. It just concerns me her not seeing a fourth and fifth round in her career, how she's going to manage that gas tank. But, man, in the Juana Pierno fight, round 3, I mean, she still had it, man. She was still coming at a high pace, man. So it's a tricky fight, but I'm with you. I think kind of Rose has a ton of advantages here. I have ultimately played starts round 4 at -145. We were, I almost did the over 3.5, but then you were like, Eba's never seen round 4. It's like, okay, I don't even want 2.5 minutes of round 4. So we'll just take starts round 4 there because that's when it could start getting really hairy. So I do think the fight goes the distance at a pretty decent clip, though, man. 2 high-level girls near the top of their weight class, former champs. I know Ribas's chin hasn't really held up in the past, but Marina Rodriguez, big girl, hits hard. Macy Barber, super physical girl. It's like, I don't know if Rose technically has that in her hands, so
it would take the perfect shot like the Weili Zhang fight.
Exactly. So I'm with you, man. I think it goes over at a really high clip, and I kind of like Rose to win the decision here.
All right, so I have made the play. I am parlaying Padilla and Rose plus 137, about the same odds as I'm laying on Julian Erosa. Give me that, dude. I'm pretty confident Julian Erosa or that parlay is going to hit, and we'll profit if that happens. So
nice. I think I'm probably going to find myself on the Padilla side somewhere as well for Saturday. I like him as well. So appreciate you guys hanging out with us. All 13 fights, almost an hour. I know we got somebody on vacation next week, but we are going to try to swing something if possible. So I appreciate you guys hanging out, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.